It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The government told to apologise and pay out billions to women born in the 50s who lost out on changes to their pensions. Worlds turned upside down. We hear from the families desperate for answers after the bodies of their loved ones were found in a funeral home in Hull. The US government sues Apple, accusing the tech giant of engineering an illegal monopoly on smartphones. In Gaza, hopes grow for a ceasefire as the US tables a motion for the UN Security Council tomorrow. Business as usual as Queen Camilla thanks well-wishers in Belfast, saying the King is doing well. Plus, the Hogwarts Express brought to a halt as the iconic Highland steam train is suspended over safety concerns. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. The government has been told to do the right thing and pay compensation to millions of women born in the 1950s who've been hit by a rise to the state pension age. Campaigners say their lives have been ruined and they weren't properly informed about the change. Well, more than 3.5 million women born in the 1950s were affected by the rise. Before 2010, the age at which women could claim their state pension was 60. It was set to rise steadily to 65 by 2020 to bring it in line with the male retirement age. But the coalition government voted to speed this up, making it 63 years old by 2016 and 65 by November 2018, a move made to save money during austerity. The women affected have called for more than £10,000 each in compensation, arguing the changes were not communicated effectively or far enough ahead of time. A report today agreed that they were wronged, but recommended compensation of between £1,000 and £2,950, which could cost as much as £10 billion. Sky correspondent Siobhan Freeman-Powell reports.
When the government extended the pension age for women to match men, it was meant to make things more fair. But instead, it left women like Michelle vulnerable, especially as the news came not long after a heart attack.
Well, very shocked, and very frightened. I mean, I was just lucky that I was able to go and stay at my son's. I couldn't live here at that time because the mortgage had to be paid and I didn't have income to pay it. So, extreme stress on top of already being ill.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
It was back in 2011 that the government announced the pension age for women would rise to 66, impacting around 3.8 million people. But most of them were not told. And after years of campaigning and an investigation led by the National Ombudsman, today it was announced that the women of the 50s were poorly treated and inadequately informed, suggesting that the government of today should pay for the political mistakes of the past.
I think putting it right will cost money. It will cost probably in the region of £36 billion, but they've already saved £181 billion by making this change. So it's time now to put some of that back into the pockets of the women they took it away from.
However, the Ombudsman has cast doubt over whether the Department for Work and Pensions will comply with the findings and cough up the cash.
They have made it clear that they don't agree with our findings of maladministration, that therefore they won't be implementing any recommendations in relation to financial compensation. And for that reason, we have taken the unique step of going straight to Parliament and asking them to set up a mechanism for compensation.
But whether any action will actually be taken is yet to be seen.
The government will look at the findings and the recommendations of that report. I'm not in a position where I can comment on the details of it.
The WASPy women aren't sure if they will ever see what they believe they're owed. But they now know that their complaints were valid and their voices in Parliament will finally be heard. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Our political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh joins us now from Westminster. And Serena, is the government likely to give these women what they're asking for?
Well, the government doesn't have to act on these findings, and they haven't committed that today. That's the blunt reality. But what the Parliamentary Ombudsman have done today is taken the rare but necessary step to ask Parliament to intervene, perhaps to add some political pressure to this. Now, their report concludes that due to the poor communications of over the age change, that women should be compensated. And the government said that they will look at the findings of this report. The DWP, though, gave another statement. They said, "We will respond in due course, having cooperated fully. The government has always been committed to supporting pensioners in a sustainable way." Now, sustainable way is the interesting part, because the costs will be huge, and there's some acknowledgement of that there. The Ombudsman recommended a payout of between £1,000 to £3,000 per woman. The WASPI women won about £10,000. So these are huge numbers. Now, the Home Secretary James Cleverly said they will look at the findings, but it was too early to commit. Labour also say similar words. And the problem with these sums is that the government are now having to pay for other failures, the post office scandal, the infected blood scandal. These are racking up. So today we got words, acceptance, the failure to communicate, but no route yet on how that will be resolved.
Serena, thank you. A man who received what he believed to be his grandmother's ashes, only to be told her body was one of 35 found in a funeral home in Hull, says his world has been turned upside down. Under the alias of Liam, he told Sky News he used legacy independent funeral directors when his grandmother died last year. Sky correspondent Charlotte Leeming reports from Hull.
A city united in shock and grief. As the investigation continues into the legacy independent funeral directors, the families affected look for answers. Liam, which isn't his real name, lost his grandma last year and believed her body was cremated. He says police phoned him last week to say she was amongst the 35 bodies recovered from the funeral home. But hours later, his liaison officer called and said they couldn't confirm it was her.
It's so shocking and so scary not to know what they've been doing to your loved ones. And there's absolutely nothing we can do but sit and wait to hear what the police have to say. And in my current position, I don't feel like I can believe what the police are saying. I don't have faith in the police now. It's such a horrible situation to be in. I feel the way we're being treated now is absolutely shocking. They call to tell us that they have no information, which doesn't make us feel any better. It doesn't support us in any way, it just makes us feel more isolated.
In a statement, Humberside Police told us specialist-trained family liaison officers have met with the family to which this report relates. The families affected as part of this investigation are our utmost concern and priority. And in this case, whilst trying to ensure we offer as much support through keeping families informed and up to date with the investigation and its progression, an error has been made on our part.
What you got?
Another person feeling the emotional turmoil is Billy Jo Suffle. She's feeling nervous and anxious after she used the firm for the cremations of her father and brother in 2022.
It took a few days to sink in, but when it did, it was a big shock. Like, I couldn't even function with my kids. It was like, it wasn't even real. I don't want it to affect my kids, and it is, especially my two oldest girls. They had a breakdown about it when we first found out, and seeing them that upset, it was horrible.
The investigation has prompted calls for the funeral sector to be regulated. And to help reassure residents, every funeral home in Hull and East Yorkshire is being inspected by council officers over the next few days to check their procedures.
It's fair to say that they are so upset by this case, understandably, and they want to be able to demonstrate that they can provide care, dignity and respect to the bereaved and in the way that they deal with the deceased.
A 46-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman arrested as part of the inquiry have been released on bail. Families have been invited to gather for a vigil at Hull Minster on Saturday. Support for the community that is waiting for answers. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Hull.
The US Justice Department has announced a major lawsuit against Apple, accusing the tech giant of maintaining an illegal monopoly on smartphones. Apple is accused of locking out competitors, stifling competition and driving up prices. Our US correspondent Mark Stone reports.
For years now, the US Justice Department has had its sights on Apple. Now they've fired the shot.
Today, the department alleges that Apple, one of the world's largest tech companies,
crossed the line from rigorous competition to anti-competitive exclusion.
Once a startup, now an upstart, stifling competition. That is the gist of this massive lawsuit from President Biden's Justice Department and 16 states across the country.
We allege that Apple has employed a strategy that relies on exclusionary, anti-competitive conduct that hurts both consumers and developers. We allege that Apple has consolidated its monopoly power, not by making its own products better, but by making other products worse.
It is a sign of the times and of Apple's ubiquity that what was once the library in Washington, D.C. is now an Apple store.
Nice fonts and application and everything, but sometimes you tied up with them.
I love Apple stuff.
So you don't think they have an unfair advantage over the competitors?
No.
No?
3 apples.
They're good at what they do.
I think that they're obviously trying their best to steer you in that direction, but I also think it's just a well-made product.
In a statement, the company hit back. This lawsuit threatens who we are and the principles that set Apple products apart in fiercely competitive markets. It would also set a dangerous precedent, empowering government to take a heavy hand in designing people's technology, they said. The fascinating thing about this lawsuit is that it cuts to the very heart of everything that Apple is intentionally and proudly all about, creating an exclusive ecosystem, a place where everything inside is compatible and easy and where nothing from the outside works, a place that will cost you to access. Is that an unfair monopoly, or is it just good business? Cue an almighty court battle. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
To the Middle East now, and the US is expected to bring a resolution at the United Nations tomorrow calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as part of a hostage deal. Let's go live to Washington, D.C. and our US correspondent there, James Matthews. And James, just how significant is this move, and does it point to a shift in the American position?
Hi, Gillian. Yeah, it's significant, and it is a shift, reflecting, I think, the change on the ground in Gaza. You'll remember that America's vetoes thus far have been based on their insistence that an unconditional ceasefire could derail peace talks. Well, this new draft resolution that it's going to present at the UN has nuanced language. It's interesting when you look at some of the text. It determines the imperative of an immediate and sustained ceasefire to protect civilians. Talks about, towards that end, unequivocally supporting ongoing international diplomatic efforts for a ceasefire and hostage release. So still the linkage between a ceasefire and hostage release. Forceful language, but I think there is room for manoeuvre and keeps pressure on Israel to act in the humanitarian cause, whether or not there is a deal or no deal in the near term. That deal, of course, is being discussed in Qatar. That'll be interesting to see how these events at the UN frame that particular meeting on a way forward. Interesting to see what happens at the UN itself, of course, because with the Americans having vetoed a number of resolutions, the Russians have passed them. Will the Russians now invoke their veto so that the Americans aren't allowed to dig themselves out of the hole that many think they've dug for themselves?
James, thank you. Staying with the Middle East, the Foreign Secretary has described his frustration at delays in getting aid into Gaza, accusing Israel of delaying the delivery of UK-funded humanitarian supplies. Lord Cameron says he's aware that some British aid has been held up by almost 3 weeks while waiting for Israeli permission to cross the border. Palestinians in Gaza continue to be dependent on aid, the majority of which enters the Strip on trucks, coming in via the Rafah and Kerem Shalom crossings. Yesterday, the UK sent its largest aid package so far, with food for over 250,000 people. NHS doctors have also entered Gaza, opening a field hospital in the coastal area of Al-Mawasi. A Sky News team has filmed at the hospital for the first time, as our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports.
This is the new British field hospital being constructed in southern Gaza. It's being staffed by NHS doctors, flown in from the UK.
We have a number of family doctor stations which gradually will become an emergency department as the hospital becomes fully operational.
They're working around the clock to get it built. Once fully operational, probably in the next 4 or 5 days, they'll be able to care for 250 patients a day here.
Further down, this building here is going to be an inpatient ward. So we will have 3 wards, so 36 patients in here.
For thousands, this will become the only hospital that they can get easy or safe access to.
The hospitals are far away. We have no transportation. Also, they're quite busy because there are so many wounded people being treated there.
We are suffering because of living in camps, because of malnutrition. We are always ill.
Jabalia camp in northern Gaza is where the humanitarian crisis is at its worst. There's only one road here for aid trucks, and they've often struggled to get into the north, either stopped by the IDF or unable to go forward because of the security situation. 70% of people in northern Gaza are said to be on the brink of starvation. And today, the British Foreign Secretary accused Israel of closing its border crossing on Saturdays and said that some British aid had been waiting at the border for almost 3 weeks for Israel to let it in. The United Nations told us that Israel was rejecting many essential items.
For a full range of nutritional support and for medical support, we need to get the private sector, the pharmacies and other places and other outlets working.
People focus on food, of course, but it's not just food. No. There's all sorts of stuff that needs to go in. Is that being allowed in, or are you finding a lot of stuff being rejected?
Well, there's a lot of stuff getting rejected for water and sanitation and for health systems. Particularly you have like solar panels and for things like generators, spare parts for water and sanitation systems. They're blocked. Chemicals for treating water are blocked as well.
The simple reality is that the less food there is, the greater the desperation, and the worse the security becomes. It's a vicious circle in a vicious wall. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
The Governor of the Bank of England has hinted a cut in interest rates could be on the cards, despite holding them at 5.25% for the 5th time in a row. Even though inflation is falling, the bank's governor says the economy is still not yet at a stage where rate cuts can be made. More than 500 people attempted to cross the channel in small boats yesterday, the highest daily number since the start of December. It takes the total number of people making the crossing so far this year to more than 4,000, a 10% increase on the same period last year. Ireland's Higher Education Minister, Simon Harris, looks set to become the country's next Prime Minister, the youngest Taoiseach in Ireland's history. It comes after all other leading contenders ruled themselves out following Leo Varadkar's shock resignation yesterday. The family of a British woman who's been missing for 3 years in the US Virgin Islands has appealed for President Biden to help find her. Sam Heslop was last seen on her boyfriend's catamaran in March 2021. Her mother believes she was killed and wants police to launch a murder investigation. She's been speaking to our US correspondent, Martha Kellner.
Sam Heslop was living what seemed to be her dream life in the US Virgin Islands. She'd moved to the Caribbean to be with her new boyfriend, Ryan Bain. They lived together on this boat, but in March 2021, in the dead of night, Sam disappeared from the catamaran. 3 years on, she's still officially missing, but her mum Brenda believes she was killed.
I do believe she was murdered, and there are places where people can be put in the ocean and never found, and I believe that's what happened. I'd like to just bring her home. I can grieve then. I haven't grieved.
Ryan Bain reported Sam missing to police at 2:30 a.m, saying he woke up to find her gone. He was advised to tell the Coast Guard, but reportedly didn't do so until 9 hours later. When they eventually boarded the boat, a Coast Guard report alleges he was drunk and prevented a search of the cabin. Island police have never interviewed him, never forensically searched the boat and refused assistance from the FBI. Speaking from the UK, Brenda says she wants the US authorities to remove the case from Virgin Islands police. Would you like President Biden and the White House to intervene in this?
Absolutely. I even emailed Biden, who didn't reply. You know, I was asking for his assistance, for somebody, some department of his to help us.
I travelled to Lake Orion in Michigan, Ryan Bain's hometown, in search of him. He remains a person of interest in the case, but not a suspect. He was recently spotted in a gym here, but has since gone underground. He doesn't respond to my emails or phone calls. He's registered as living at an address with his parents, Fred and Joyce. At first, they deny who they are. Mr. and Mrs. Bain?
No, you got the wrong people.
I think I've got the right people. Yep. Did Ryan have anything to do with Sam's disappearance? Did Ryan have anything... Sorry, sir, did Ryan have anything to do with Sam's disappearance? Will he talk to the police? What happened to the boat? What happened to the boat, sir? Please don't snatch my microphone. Ryan Bain has a domestic violence conviction. In 2011, he was jailed for assaulting his ex-wife, Corrie Stevenson. In a statement, a lawyer for Ryan Bain said, "While we empathise with Sam's family's frustration, Ryan Bain had nothing to do with Sam's disappearance. The Coast Guard was twice on the vessel conducting a search and questioning Ryan. They had unfettered access to the vessel, and Ryan answered all questions posed to him." The Virgin Islands Police Department didn't respond to repeated requests for comment. The search for Sam and for justice continues. Martha Kellner, Sky News.
The Archbishop of Canterbury and Sir Keir Starmer have both called for an end to speculation over the Princess of Wales's health as the royal family tries to refocus attention on their work. It was business as normal for Queen Camilla on a visit to Belfast today, as she thanked crowds of well-wishers, saying the King is doing very well as he receives treatment for cancer. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
Hello. Hello. They'd come to see Camilla, but it was little Fitzwilliam who stole the spotlight.
Stealing the thunder here. Natural for the cameras. Not for me.
The Queen wanted to hear about South Belfast's family businesses. They wanted to ask about her family.
Your Majesty, I hope the Queen is doing well.
Give some room, guys. He's doing very well, the reply. And cards too for the King, who couldn't come in person.
Well, thank you. He'll be delighted. I'll take them back today.
For now, these joint trips are solo engagements.
My husband sends me his very, very best.
Oh, nice
wishes. I'm very sorry not to be here.
Oh. And this her first visit to Northern Ireland without the King.
Thank you so much.
He was seen leaving Clarence House, away from public duties, but still holding private audiences at Buckingham Palace. Elsewhere, investigations on the London clinic where members of staff tried to access Kate's medical records. High-profile support for the princess from the Archbishop of Canterbury and Labour leader Keir Starmer.
Is he moving a bit more than he would?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But here, something the Princess of Wales wants us to see. Health visitors in Hull.
He's really focused on you, isn't he? That's so nice.
Part of a trial funded by the Princess and her Centre for Early Childhood.
Yeah, that's a nice sound.
They tested a special tool to assess babies.
We were trying to look for eye contact, facial expression, how physically active a baby was, and as well how they're vocalising.
Kate's health visitor trial has been evaluated by Oxford University, and the results are overwhelmingly positive. The Princess of Wales is away from duties, but her early years work continues, and we're told she is being kept up to date with its progress, including the fact this trial's been such a success, it's being expanded to several new sites. And that's good news for the Princess after a difficult few weeks. And this something positive to get stuck into once she's back to work. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Hull.
Football now, and Wales's hopes of reaching Euro 2024 are still alive tonight. They beat Finland 4-1 with goals coming from David Brooks. This from Nico Williams to go 2-0 up. And the others from Brennan Johnson and Dan James. Wales's next game is against Poland in the playoffs on Tuesday. Perhaps better known as the Hogwarts Express, the Jacobite train service through the Scottish Highlands has been suspended over safety concerns. The steam train, made famous by the Harry Potter films, takes passengers from Fort William to Mallaig over the iconic Glenfinnan Viaduct. It's now been forced to pause operations as it awaits a decision on whether it can continue to run with hinged doors, which typically aren't allowed. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis reports.
It is the soundtrack of the Highland summer. Easy to see why this train journey was voted one of the best on the planet.
You must be getting close. Hold on.
Made famous by Harry Potter, a trip where 700 passengers a day now hitch a ride, hoping to head to Hogwarts. But this is what the season looks like so far. Carriages sitting empty 300 miles away in Lancashire, suspended over safety concerns.
They're big Harry Potter fans, so we came to see the viaduct to get a little bit of Harry Potter in Scotland back with us.
And we're hearing the train's not going to go ahead for the foreseeable.
That's very sad.
You came all the way from Spain?
I'm coming from Spain, from Barcelona, to see that. And if it's not possible to see, it's really a shame.
The rail regulator says it told the operator West Coast Railways to upgrade these 1950s locks 3 years ago, but it fell on deaf ears.
Now what they're required to fit is like a central locking system like you'd have on your car, which means that the guard or the conductor in charge of the train from their work point on the train can flick a switch which bolts all of the doors with an electric throw bolt.
Tourism runs through the veins of this part of Scotland. Businesses hanging on the coattails of the steam train, bringing that annual boost to trade. At some points, there can be 5, 6, 7 times as many visitors here than residents, and that means the collateral damage could be significant.
I'm not quite sure what I'll do. I've got staff that are dependent on me. I've got my kids, I've got my bills. It's quite scary, to be honest.
Bosses of the train say retrofitting the modern locks would cost them £7 million.
The record speaks for itself, that in 40 years of where records still exist, there have been no incidences of falls out of doors or while trains are moving. It has not happened, and certainly central door locking wouldn't change any of that.
The standoff over safety looks set to cast a spell over the future of this iconic journey. All those involved are racing to save the summer. Conor Gillis, Sky News in Fort William.
Beautiful shot. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster, Carol Malone, and the editor of the Courier in Dundee, David Clegg. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Metro about tonight's top story here on Sky News. Its headline at £35 billion, waspy sting. Stay with us for more details on that and other stories. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The government has said it will consider a report that's recommended paying compensation to thousands of women who weren't informed their pension age was due to change. The US Justice Department has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Apple, accusing the technology giant of engineering an illegal monopoly in smartphones. The United States is expected to bring a resolution at the United Nations tomorrow, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as part of a hostage deal. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster Carol Malone and the editor of the Courier in Dundee, David Clegg. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro says that millions of women could get thousands of pounds compensation after a report found that they weren't properly informed about changes to their state pension. The Eye says the so-called WASPy women are now asking Labour to promise to pay out compensation if they win the next general election. This is the Daily Mirror's take on the story. Pay them what they are owed. Similar sentiments are voiced on the front of the Daily Express. The Mail, however, fears that most of the women will get only about £2,900 and that ministers won't even commit to that. America is toughening its call for a ceasefire in Gaza with a new resolution to the UN Security Council. That's according to The Guardian. The Financial Times reports that the US Justice Department is suing Apple, alleging that the tech giant has attempted to create a monopoly in the mobile sector. The Telegraph leads with official forecasts which suggest that the UK's sickness benefits bill will rise by a third by the end of this decade. While the Times carries news that 1 million more people than 3 years ago now say they're struggling to function because of poor mental health. And the Daily Star carries the apparent threat by a politician in Botswana to send 10,000 elephants to live in Hyde Park. They would find it a bit chilly, I think. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Carol Malone and David Clegg. Welcome to both of you.
Hello.
Let us start with the Daily Mail, shall we? The bold headline, new betrayal of WASPy women. Carol, take us into the detail of this story and what's happened today.
This morning when the story broke, it was the Parliamentary Ombudsman had said these WASPy women are owed money. These are the women who were born in the 50s who didn't realise that the pension age was moving from 60 to 65. So when the story first broke, I thought, this is great. They're going to get the compensation now. But the line the Mail is taking is that actually that's probably not going to be the case. They're saying that these women who've asked for £10,000 might probably end up with between £1,000 and £2,950. And I have to say, I've had dealings with the WASPy women over the years. I am one myself. And they are the most tenacious, relentless, incredible group of women you could ever come across because they've been given not a lot of hope over the years that this is ever going to happen. And they've fought on regardless. So I'm thrilled that the Parliamentary Ombudsman has said this today, but the bottom line is the Ombudsman Group can't rule on this. The government, the Department of Work and Pensions, doesn't have to take any notice of their recommendations, and that is going to be the problem. And the DWP have already indicated that they may not pay compensation. And I think this is something, and this is going to be a huge disappointment for these incredible women. I think the Tories will kick the can down the road, thinking that they're going to be kicked out anyway come October, and this will become Labour's problem. And Labour was saying nothing today, and they have said something tonight, and that's on the front of one of the other papers. And they're not committing.
They've said something, but they've not really said anything.
They're not committing. They don't want to pay either. Nobody wants to pay. I mean,
but David, the women have been extremely astute in actually calling on Labour to make a decision and make a promise on this, presuming they come into power.
I think that this is going to become a real political problem in this general election, both for Labour and the Conservatives. I mean, the point about this, this has been a long-running issue. It is successive governments who have failed here. When you have the Ombudsman saying that there's been a government injustice and maladministration, it's clearly a serious issue. It isn't a party political problem because it's been for over such a long period of time that both parties are on the hook for it. So I think what we're faced with now is what could be a bill of up to, well, it's running into the billions, certainly. The various figures are being bandied around, up to $10.5 billion. At a time of very stretched public finances, that is not something that either party would really relish having to find the cash for. However, given this injustice and the fact in particular, I think that the Conservatives will delay this until after the election, so it will become an election issue. We see on the front page of the Mirror today that they are saying pay them what they are owed, which I think is a sentiment that will be very wildly held throughout the public. Amazed though I was to hear that Carol was a WASPy woman who could believe.
Thank you. That's very good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think that there is going to be a lot of pressure. And these are very astute and determined campaigners. So the issue then for Keir Starmer in particular is how does he play that before the election, given that he is, I think the comment we had from a party spokesman today is they don't want to make unfunded spending commitments, which we've heard over a whole range of issues.
And what they're saying that they need time to reflect on the report. That's been one of their responses as well.
What's tragic here? You know, when I said I'm a WASPy woman, I am. But for me, it didn't affect or harm me because I had no intention of retiring at 60 or 65. I'll keep on going until I get, put out to pasture. But for a lot of these women, they expected to retire at 60 and they felt they'd missed out on opportunities to get their finances in order. And I think that is probably true. And these are the women who deserve the £10,000 each that they're asking for because they lost out. We're going to have to work, and I actually really enjoy what I do. A lot of women wanted to get out of what they were doing. They were tired, they'd had enough. Not every job is as interesting as ours. And these women wanted out of the workplace. And suddenly they're faced with the prospect of 5 more years without their pension. So,
and the point on that, I think, and this idea that the politicians are going to delay this, kick the can down the road as much. There was a startling statistic from one of the campaigners, and I think it was the Mail today, that there's a WASPy woman dying every 13 minutes. Every 13 minutes. So the Ombudsman has said very clearly these people are entitled to compensation. It seems perverse almost that the DWP are just rejecting that out of hand.
But David, the Ombudsman have always...
How can they?
Well, but they can. And the Ombudsman knew this was going to happen to the point where they've actually said they've asked Parliament to intervene. The Ombudsman said today, I haven't got the exact quote, but he said something like he didn't think it was likely that the DWP were going to agree to pay up. So they wanted put to Parliament to do something about it, to take a vote on it. So, I mean, but I also think that'll be kicked.
Yeah, because the Department for Work and Pensions have indicated that they will refuse to comply.
Yes, yeah. They don't have to by law, Jill. It's not legal. They don't have to. What the Ombudsman does is recommend. He gives a series of recommendations. And you don't have to, they don't have to be followed. But any government that ignores this, whether it be this Tory government or the next Labour government, it's a really bad look for, when these women who have been, they feel they've been done out of money, the rest of the country thinks they've been done out of money, and for a government to just heartlessly ignore that while spending money on other things that people might not deem quite so important, it's going to be a very bad look for Starmer if he doesn't do something.
Well, it's presumably going to be a little while to the election, so there will be time for this to be brought up again and again, and presumably they will have to make some comment, if not commitment. So that's also covered in the Metro. Yeah. And the Eye also, will they have to wait for help from a Labour government, if they will get help from a Labour government. Let's move on to Gaza tonight. And Lord Cameron, decidedly tougher tones we're hearing from him.
Yes, I think There's a story on the front page of the Telegraph. UK to cut off Israel arms supply unless it lets aid into Gaza. And this is a continuation of this sense that Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, is getting more and more frustrated with Israel, especially around this issue of UK-funded aid getting in. And I think this line in the Telegraph would suggest that the patients are wearing thin here. It says, Britain's warned Israel it will cut off arms supplies unless it lets aid into Gaza and sticks to international law. And there's talk, this is Lord Cameron, is understood to have told Israel officials in recent talks that an arms embargo could be declared if Hamas prisoners held in Israel jail are denied access to visits from the Red Cross.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because Cameron today had said that UK aid has been sitting outside Gaza for 3 weeks now, and they're not letting it in. But Downing Street, interestingly, have said tonight that the UK government still believes Israel is acting within international humanitarian law, which seems to be a contradiction. But, you know, what we do know now in Gaza, there are 1.1 million, the worst part is northern Gaza, 1.1 million people. And there's an organisation called the IPC, which is the body that declares what a famine is. They're saying that already 1.1 million people in Gaza are now suffering the effects of famine, and that by May or June this year, because there's 2 million people in Gaza, the rest will also be suffering. And the supreme irony here is that it is now Ramadan in Gaza. This is the time when people fast within daylight hours. Now, a lot of these people have been fasting for 5 months now, and here they are in Ramadan and expected not to eat in daylight hours. But it is shocking, you know. There were 27 people who died in northern Gaza recently. 23 were children, and they died of malnutrition and dehydration. So people are actually, it's not just people getting bombed and killed now. No. They're dying of starvation.
They're in famine.
Yeah.
The Guardian looking at a US call for an immediate ceasefire. So also, as well as Lord Cameron, a very distinct change in stance there from the Americans.
I think that it's interesting reading these two stories side by side and seeing this general sense that both in the US and the UK, two of Israel's staunchest allies from the outside of this conflict, both beginning to lose patience, both changing their language, both changing their rhetoric. And this is a draft UN Security Council resolution where they're calling for immediate ceasefire. So from my understanding, that's that the US position over the time of this conflict has gone from Israel has an absolute right to defend itself to there needs to be a pause to there needs to be a temporary ceasefire, and now it's an immediate ceasefire. And I think that shows again that the Biden administration, similarly to the UK government, its relationship with Israel seems to be fraying in a way that they are becoming concerned. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the importance of domestic pressures, both with big elections coming up in the near future and significant...
But what it also shows, David, is that Israel doesn't care what the US thinks or what we think. I mean, there are meetings in Qatar this week. Israel are having talks in Qatar to try and come to some kind of new arrangement with Hamas and to get humanitarian aid in and the hostages out. But the impression you get is that Israel does not want a ceasefire, and I don't blame them for not wanting to negotiate with Hamas. But something's got to happen soon.
Carol and David, for the moment, thank you. We are going to take a break coming up. Has Apple built a monopoly on smartphones? The US government thinks so. We'll discuss that next. Do stay with us.
I don't think we can completely ban junk food in supermarkets, but we can certainly do a lot more in terms of educating people of what they can buy. Because you can actually go into a supermarket and buy very, very healthy food. You don't actually have to go for the junk. But if people don't know how, within their very busy and time-poor lives, how to build in those really healthy foods, the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains, we are a nation deficient in fibre. people will really, really struggle with their health. They'll continue to go for that junk food because they think it's the easiest thing.
It's about letting people make choices about their own lives. And we've got to be treating adults like adults and arguing these ideas, effectively saying that actually what the solution should be is that we should be banning junk food, we should be taking it away from people. We already tax sugar a huge amount, so effectively it means that your Coke is more expensive than your Coke Zero. And what that means is that we are putting up the price for everyday people. I say, let people make their own health choices. Sometimes people want to eat chocolate, and I think we should let them.
I do think we should look, I love chocolate as well, and I do sometimes love a bit of junk food. It's not always about eating super healthy
What's junk
food.
To you?
Oh, some junk food to me. So sometimes I'll have a healthier treat, and that might be dates and nut butter. But sometimes I do want to have some chocolate cake. Yes, I'll pick the plant-based chocolate cake, but it's not the healthiest thing. But in the most part, I am going for those plant-based whole foods which give me thriving health. And I see people day in, day out struggling with their health. These are intelligent people. They don't want to be eating the junk food, but they don't understand what else to eat within their busy lives. And the things they can actually pick in the supermarkets, I can send them to a slightly different aisle, and they don't realise the incredible food that exists.
Well, I think it's really insulting to be telling people that they are, they don't understand what's going on, they don't understand what's in the supermarket, they don't understand what healthy food looks like. There are very clever people like you online that are going to be able to tell them. The resources out there are numerous. You can go online, search online, and find out exactly how to create healthy alternatives, how to create healthy recipes. And actually, I think it's really insulting. We've ended up in this culture where effectively we're expecting the government to control our healthcare and life choices. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me, Karen Malone and David Clegg. Let's continue this section by taking a look at the Financial Times and this story, which has been running all day. The fact that the US has accused Apple of acting illegally in terms of ensuring a monopoly to put rivals kind of out of business.
This is the US Department of Justice, and it's the latest in a series of attempts to crack down on the market dominance and the business practices of the big tech companies. And the list of offences that Apple are being accused here of is quite astonishing, really. It's blocking apps, suppressing cloud streaming services, third-party digital services, stuff like digital wallets, and giving access to that to competitors. So basically what they're saying is that they have carved out, I think it's 65% market share in the United States, and that they have done that through using a monopoly.
Being smart, isn't it? Is it?
Well, that is certainly Apple's.
Practice?
That is certainly Apple's take on it. They've called this case a dangerous precedent if it goes ahead.
Well, it's not that much of a precedent, because years ago, 1998 or something, there was a case exactly the same brought against Microsoft, and Bill Gates lost the case. However, within a few months, it was partially, half of it was taken back, and they did some kind of deal. So there would have been some money deal done. But exactly the same thing happened to Microsoft. But this is just about a company it's got, what did I read? Its GDP is their worth, their trillions of worth, is worth the GDP of 100 countries, which is...
It's 97 billion last year.
It was the first... What's a trillion? How many billion is a trillion?
No,
no, because
a lot, my director says.
In 2018, it became the first trillion-dollar company, and then 2 years later, in 2020, it was a $2 trillion company, which is astonishing.
But the point of the story is that they've maintained this power and this position, the courts are saying, not because of their superiority, I think is the quote, but because of its unlawful behaviour.
Well, you see, what Apple are saying is that the facts that the government are using are wrong and that the law is wrong. And what they're basically saying is if you try to what's the word, pin them down, that they're not going to be able to create the kind of successful technologies that Apple has become famous for. And I kind of believe that. That makes sense to me.
My sense is that you talk about it's a monopoly, right? And I can't talk. There's my phone there. I see yours is the same. There's an iPad there. They definitely have a monopoly. They definitely have a monopoly at this table.
Why do we choose them? We choose them because they give us more options than most other phones.
So it's definitely very good. That is one thing. It's a high quality product.
Because all of their products are compatible with each other, so you can't dip in. You're either all in or all out.
And you also know how difficult it would be to change over and import all those things over all the pictures, all the information you have.
That's good business practice, isn't it? As far as Apple's concerned.
Well, I guess that's what this case is going to decide, whether that's good practice or whether that's exclusionary business practices which are illegal.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? I mean, it's got us talking, and certainly it's going to be a very interesting case.
Every company to make sure that other companies can't compete with them. That's the whole point of your existence as a company, isn't it?
But that's what we'll
take down all the other companies around you to do the same as you.
But the point, Carol, is that they say this is not only bad for the competitors, it's also bad for the customer. It's bad for the public because it means that prices can be kept artificially high and that there's not the same choices there would be otherwise.
Okay. Well, the shows shut up now. She got that look.
No, I would never use that phrase. Let's move on to the Guardian, because I want to get this in. It's very interesting. David, would you ever be a member of an all-male club like the Garrick?
No.
Have you, love, would they?
I don't think... Is there an income requirement? Because I'm sure I would clear that.
I think you've got to be either a government minister or incredibly wealthy or terribly posh and aristocratic.
I'm not meeting any of those categories yet.
But the call now is from a group of lawyers that judges and lawyers shouldn't be members because it's not espousing the core principles of justice, equality and fairness because women are not allowed.
Are not allowed, yeah. And the thing, I have experience at the Garrick Club. I've actually been thrown out of the Garrick Club because...
badge of honour there.
It's sort of a badge of honour. I mean, I was invited to a dinner there. Women can go in if you're part of a party with a member who's a male. Anyway, they tried to throw me out. They couldn't, obviously. And it all was a thing.
Obviously, she said.
Well, they couldn't because I just said to the guy, what are you going to do? You're going to manhandle me out? He said, well, no. I said, well, I'm not going because it was raining outside. I wasn't going to wear... Anyway, long story short, I think men should be able to have their clubs because I can't imagine anything more boring than actually spending a night full of men. And he's the same. You said I wouldn't go because there's no women. You actually said that. Why
be careful what you say to Carol in the break.
Carol will quote that back while your wife is watching.
We must leave. Carol and David, thank you very much. We'll see you in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at the weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, it will stay unsettled to end the week, but a change in wind direction will make it cooler than recently. Southern Britain will start Friday cloudy and damp, but southeast England will mainly be dry. Elsewhere, there'll be a scattering of blustery showers, some wintry on the Scottish hills. More of England and Wales will turn dry and brighter through the morning, but the southeast will stay dull with patchy light rain moving in elsewhere. There'll also be sunny spells and heavy showers with hail, thunder and hill snow possible. After the recent warmth, temperatures will return to near average, but it'll feel even colder in the strong winds across the north.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up next on Sky News at 11, the government is told to apologise and pay up billions to women born in the 50s who lost out on changes to their pensions.